I was sitting in a small conference room in Chicago when the lawyer read my stepfather's will. My mother, Victoria, sat across from me with a stiff smile on her face, while my half-brother Lucas sat beside her, looking bored. The lawyer, Mr. Bennett, adjusted his glasses and continued reading. To my stepdaughter, Ava Thompson, he read, I leave my house in Lincoln Park, along with all its contents. My mother's smile disappeared instantly. Mr. Bennett continued, the remaining assets, including bank accounts, investments, and properties totaling approximately $1.9 million, shall also go to Ava Thompson. The room went completely silent. My mother slowly turned her head and looked at me. Her expression changed from shock to pure rage within seconds. What the hell is this? She snapped, looking at the lawyer. This can't be right. Richard would never leave everything to her. Mr. Bennett remained calm. Mrs. Thompson, this is your late husband's final will. It was signed and notarized 6 months ago. Everything has been left to Miss Ava Thompson. My mother stood up so fast that her chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is bullshit, she shouted. That house is worth over $1 million alone. And the money? That's my money too. I was married to him for 12 years. I stayed quiet, watching her meltdown. I already knew this was coming. My stepfather, Richard, had warned me months ago that my mother might react badly. Lucas finally spoke, his voice filled with disbelief. You've got to be kidding me, he said, looking at me. You? He left everything to you? You're not even his real daughter. I looked at my half-brother coldly. No, I said, I'm not. But unlike you two, I actually took care of him when he got sick. I was the one who stayed with him in the hospital. I was the one who made sure he wasn't alone. My mother slammed her hand on the table. Don't you dare act like you're some kind of saint. You manipulated him. You turned him against us in his final days. I looked at her without any expression. No, Mom. I just treated him like a human being, something you stopped doing years ago. My mother's face turned red with anger. She pointed a finger at me. You're not keeping that house, and you're definitely not keeping that money. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to take you to court if I have to. I stood up slowly and picked up my bag. Do whatever you want, but just know that Richard made this will because he knew exactly who you are. I walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her one last time. And for the record, I added, I didn't manipulate him. He just finally saw you for who you really are. I walked out of the office without looking back. If you've ever had your own family turn against you the moment they saw money, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. My name is Ava Thompson, and this is the story of how my own mother sued me for $1.9 million after my stepfather left me his house, and how I made sure she regretted ever stepping into that courtroom. I sat in my car outside the lawyer's office for almost 20 minutes after walking out. My hands were gripping the steering wheel tightly, but I wasn't driving anywhere. I just stared blankly at the road ahead, trying to process what had just happened. My own mother had threatened to sue me, not because I did something wrong, not because I stole anything, but simply because my stepfather chose to leave his house and money to me instead of her. I finally started the car and drove home in complete silence. The entire way, my mind kept replaying my mother's words, "You're gonna regret this." When I reached my apartment, I sat on the couch and stared at the wall. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just felt empty. For years, I had tried to maintain some kind of relationship with my mother, even after she remarried and had Lucas. I visited on holidays, I called on her birthday, and I tried to be civil. But deep down, I always knew she saw me as an outsider, especially after my real father passed away when I was 12. Richard, my stepfather, had been the only one who truly treated me like family. He never made me feel like I was the daughter from the first marriage. He included me in everything, and in his final years, when he got sick with cancer, I was the one who took care of him. I took leave from work, stayed with him at the hospital, and made sure he wasn't alone. My mother, on the other hand, had become distant. She would visit Richard occasionally, but most of her time was spent managing his properties and asking about his will. I should have seen the signs earlier. My phone rang again. It was my mother. I stared at her name on the screen for a few seconds before finally answering. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. "Don't take that tone with me, Ava," she snapped. "I just spoke with my lawyer. We're filing a lawsuit against you. We're going to contest the will." I closed my eyes. "On what grounds?" I asked. "Undue influence," she said confidently. "Richard was sick and vulnerable in his final months. You took advantage of that and manipulated him into changing his will. We have witnesses." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Witnesses? Who? Your friends who barely visited him? Or Lucas, who only called Richard when he needed money?" "Don't be disrespectful," she hissed. "Richard was my husband. That money and that house should have gone to me and Lucas. You have no right to any of it." I felt my anger rising, but I kept my voice calm. "Richard left everything to me because he knew exactly what kind of person you are, Mom. He saw how you treated me. He saw how you only cared about his money. That's why he changed his will." There was a long pause. Then my mother spoke in a low, threatening voice. "You're going to lose this case, Ava, and when you do, you'll be left with nothing. I'll make sure of it. You should have just given us the house and the money when we asked nicely." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "I'm not giving you anything," I said. "If you want to fight, then let's fight. But don't say I didn't warn you." I hung up before she could reply. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the upcoming legal battle. I knew my mother was serious. She had money, connections, and a very expensive lawyer. Fighting her wouldn't be easy. The next morning, I did something I should have done the moment the will was read. I hired my own lawyer. I found a woman named Rebecca Lang, who specialized in inheritance and estate disputes. She had a reputation for being tough and strategic. When I met her in her office 2 days later, I told her everything, from my relationship with Richard to my mother's threats. After I finished, Rebecca leaned back in her chair and studied me. "Your case is strong," she said. "Your stepfather was of sound mind when he changed the will. We have medical records, witness statements from nurses, and even letters he wrote to you. However, your mother is clearly willing to fight dirty. She's already trying to build a narrative that you manipulated him." I nodded. "What do you suggest we do?" I asked. Rebecca looked at me seriously. "We fight back," she said. "We don't just defend the will. We go on the offensive. We show the court who your mother really is, her financial behavior, her relationship with your stepfather, and how she treated you over the years. If we do this right, we can not only win the case, but also damage her credibility completely." I stayed quiet for a moment thinking. Then I asked the question that had been on my mind since I left the will reading. "If we win, what happens to my mother?" Rebecca looked at me carefully. "That depends on how far you want to go," she said. "We can win the case and move on with our lives. Or we can make sure your mother faces real consequences for trying to steal what was legally yours." I looked out the window for a few seconds. Then I looked back at Rebecca and said something I never thought I would say. "I want her to regret ever suing me." Rebecca gave me a small, understanding nod. "Then we'll do this properly." Over the next few weeks, my life became consumed by legal meetings, document reviews, and strategy sessions. My mother continued to pressure me through messages and calls, sometimes acting sweet, sometimes being outright threatening. I stopped responding to her completely. One evening, while I was going through old messages between me and Richard, I found something that made me pause. It was a voice message Richard had sent me 6 months before he passed away. In it, he sounded tired but clear. "Ava, I know your mother and Lucas are going to fight you after I'm gone. That's why I'm leaving everything to you. You were the only one who was truly there for me. Don't let them take what's yours. Fight if you have to. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you while I was alive." I listened to the message 3 times. Then I saved it and sent it to Rebecca. This was the proof we needed. My stepfather had known exactly what my mother would do. And now I was going to make sure she faced the consequences of underestimating me. The lawsuit was officially filed 2 weeks later. My mother didn't just challenge the will quietly, she went all in. She accused me of manipulating Richard in his final months, claiming he was mentally weak and that I had taken advantage of his illness. She even went as far as saying that Richard had promised to leave the house and money to her and Lucas.
Rebecca wasn't surprised. "This is a classic move," she told me during one of our meetings. "When people don't have strong legal grounds, they try to create an emotional narrative. Your mother is trying to paint you as the greedy, manipulative stepdaughter who took advantage of a sick old man." I sat across from her, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. "So what do we do?" I asked. Rebecca leaned forward. "We don't just defend the will," she said. "We attack their credibility. We show the court who your mother really is, how she treated Richard, how she treated you, and what her real intentions were. We need to prove that this lawsuit isn't about justice. It's about greed." Over the next month, things got ugly. My mother started reaching out to people from Richard's life, old friends, distant relatives, even some of his former employees. She told them stories about how I had isolated Richard and brainwashed him. Some of them believed her. I started receiving messages from people I barely knew, asking me if the rumors were true. It hurt. But what hurt more was when Lucas started posting subtle things on social media. He didn't directly attack me, but he posted things like, "Family should come first," and "blood is thicker than water," with sad emojis. It was obvious he was trying to turn people against me. One evening, I was sitting in my apartment when I received a message from an old family friend, Mrs. Patterson. She had known Richard for many years. "Ava, I'm really disappointed in you," the message read. "Your mother told me everything. I always thought you were a good girl. I never expected you to do something like this to your own family." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Mrs. Patterson, with all due respect, you don't know the full story. My mother is lying." She never replied. That night, I cried for the first time since the will reading. Not because I was scared of losing the case, but because I was slowly losing people I once considered family. All because of money. Rebecca noticed the change in me during our next meeting. "You're letting them get to you," she said. "That's exactly what they want. They want you to feel isolated and guilty so you'll settle." I wiped my eyes. "I'm trying not to," I said. "But it's hard when people I've known for years are turning against me." Rebecca looked at me seriously. "Then we need to speed this up," she said. "We can't just sit back and defend ourselves. We need to go on the offensive. Now." She opened a file and slid it toward me. "I've been doing some digging into your mother's financial history," she said. "There are some very interesting things here." I looked at the documents. They were bank transfers, property records, and some suspicious transactions from the last few years. "What is this?" I asked. Rebecca pointed at one of the pages. "Your mother has been moving large amounts of money into accounts under Lucas's name over the past 3 years. She also took out a loan against one of Richard's properties without his knowledge. If we present this in court, it will show that she was already trying to take control of his assets while he was still alive." I felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. "So we have proof that she's greedy?" I asked. "More than that," Rebecca said. "We have proof that she was already trying to steal from Richard before he even passed away. This changes everything."
I looked at the documents again, feeling a strange sense of clarity. For the first time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was ready to attack. That night, I sat in my apartment and made a decision. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. If my mother wanted a war, then I was going to make sure she understood exactly who she was fighting. Because I was done being the quiet, understanding daughter. From now on, I was going to fight, and I was going to win. The next 2 weeks were intense. Rebecca and I worked almost every day to build a strong counter case. We gathered medical records, witness statements from nurses who had taken care of Richard, and most importantly, the financial documents that showed my mother had been moving money without Richard's knowledge. But my mother wasn't sitting quietly either. She started using emotional tactics. She began calling and texting me again, this time playing the victim. One message read, "Ava, I don't know why you're doing this to me. I'm your mother. We can still fix this without destroying each other. Please, let's sit down and talk like a family." I didn't reply. Another message came 2 days later. "Your brother is very upset. He feels like you're trying to take away his future. Is this really what Richard would have wanted?" This one made me angry. She was now using Lucas to guilt-trip me. I showed both messages to Rebecca. She read them and shook her head. "She's trying to emotionally manipulate you," she said. "Don't respond. Every message you send can be used against you in court. Let me handle all communication from now on." I agreed. However, things took a turn when my mother decided to go public with her story. One afternoon, I received a message from an old family friend. She sent me a link to a local Facebook group where my mother had posted a long, emotional message. In it, she wrote that her ungrateful stepdaughter was trying to steal the family inheritance and that she was fighting in court to protect what was rightfully hers and her son's. She didn't mention my name directly, but everyone in our circle knew she was talking about me. I felt humiliated. People started messaging me, some asking if it was true, others giving me advice I didn't ask for. Some even judged me without knowing the full story. It felt like my mother was trying to destroy my reputation before the case even started. That evening, I sat with Rebecca and showed her the post. "She's playing dirty," Rebecca said calmly, "but this can actually work in our favor. If she's making public statements, we can use them against her. We'll prove that she's trying to influence public opinion and pressure you." I nodded, but deep down, I was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of defending myself. Tired of my own mother treating me like an enemy. A few days later, something unexpected happened. My half-brother Lucas called me. I stared at his name on my phone for a long time before answering. "What do you want, Lucas?" I asked coldly. He was quiet for a few seconds before speaking. I wanted to talk. Mom is saying a lot of things. Some of them don't sound right." I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. "She told me that you manipulated Richard and that you're trying to take everything from us. But I don't know. Richard always liked you more than me. Even I could see that." I felt a strange feeling in my chest. "Are you calling because you actually care, or because Mom sent you?" I asked. Lucas sighed. "I don't know anymore," he admitted. "She's been acting crazy lately. She keeps saying we're going to lose everything if we don't win this case. She even asked me to lie in court if needed." My eyes widened. "She asked you to lie?" "Yeah," Lucas said quietly. "I told her I wouldn't do that. I may not be close to you, but I'm not gonna lie in court for money." I didn't know what to say. For the first time, Lucas sounded like he was questioning our mother. "Lucas," I said carefully, If you have any proof that Mom asked you to lie, you should keep it. Because if this goes to trial, things are going to get very ugly." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll think about it," he finally said. I didn't expect things to go this far." After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. For years, I had seen Lucas as my mother's loyal soldier, but maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see the truth too. Still, I couldn't trust him completely. Not yet. That night, I made a decision. I was done playing defense. If my mother wanted to destroy me publicly, then I was going to fight back. And I was going to hit harder. I called Rebecca the next morning. "I want to release some of the evidence," I told her. "Not everything, just enough to show people what my mother has really been doing." Rebecca was quiet for a few seconds. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Once we go public, there's no going back." "I'm sure," I said. "She's already trying to ruin my name. I'm not going to sit back and let her do it." Rebecca sighed. "All right," she said, "but we'll do this carefully. We'll release just enough to shift the narrative in your favor." That evening, we prepared a statement along with some selected documents and voice recordings. We didn't release everything, just enough to show that my mother had been trying to take control of Richard's assets even before he passed away. We sent it to a local news outlet that evening. By the next morning, the story had started spreading, and my mother's perfect image began to crack. The media release changed everything. Within 48 hours, the story had spread across local news and social media. Headlines read, "Chicago businessman's widow sued stepdaughter over $1.9 million inheritance. Mother accused of trying to take late husband's assets from stepdaughter." My mother's carefully maintained image took a serious hit. People who once respected her started questioning her character. Some of Richard's old business associates even reached out to me privately, offering support. But Victoria didn't back down. Instead, she became more aggressive. 2 days after the story broke, she filed an emergency motion in court, claiming that I was trying to destroy her reputation and that the leaked documents were obtained illegally. She also went on a local talk show crying on camera and saying that her own daughter was trying to publicly humiliate her. I watched the interview from my apartment. She looked devastated on screen, playing the role of a heartbroken mother perfectly. But I knew the truth. She was only doing this because she was losing control. Rebecca called me the same day. "She's panicking. Going on television was a desperate move. It makes her look guilty. We can use this against her in court." I stayed quiet for a moment before asking, "What happens now?" "Now we push harder," Rebecca replied. "We request all financial records from the past 10 years. If she was moving money without Richard's knowledge, we'll find it. And when we do, she won't have any ground left to stand on." Over the next 3 weeks, the legal battle intensified. My mother tried every trick possible. She delayed court dates, filed unnecessary motions, and even tried to get the judge changed. But Rebecca was always one step ahead. During this time, something unexpected happened. Lucas started pulling away from our mother. He stopped appearing in public with her and stopped liking her posts on social media. One evening, he sent me a message. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Mom keeps saying one thing, but the things coming out in the news, I don't know. I just wanted you to know that I'm not fully on her side anymore." I didn't reply immediately. I wasn't ready to trust him yet. But it was clear that even Lucas was starting to see cracks in our mother's story. Then came the turning point. During a court hearing in late November, Rebecca presented new evidence, bank records showing that our mother had transferred large sums of money from Richard's accounts into accounts under Lucas's name in the months before he died. She had also taken out a loan against one of his properties without his signature. The judge looked visibly displeased. "Mrs. Thompson, the judge said, looking at my mother. "These transactions raise serious questions about your conduct. I suggest you and your legal team prepare a very strong explanation for the next hearing." My mother's face turned pale. For the first time, she looked genuinely scared. After the hearing, she tried to approach me in the hallway, but Rebecca stepped in between us. "Mrs. Thompson," Rebecca said coldly, "any communication should go through the lawyers from now on." My mother glared at me over Rebecca's shoulder. "You're going to regret this, Ava," she said in a low voice. "You think you're winning, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." I looked at her without any fear. "I already know what you're capable of, Mom," I replied. "You tried to steal from your own daughter. There's nothing worse you can do now." She stared at me for a few seconds, then turned and walked away with her lawyer. That night, I sat in my apartment and realized something important. My mother was no longer just fighting for money. She was fighting for survival. And desperate people do desperate things. I had a feeling that she still had one last move left, and it was going to be ugly. The final court hearing took place on a cold December morning. I sat beside Rebecca as the judge reviewed the evidence one last time. My mother sat across from us with her lawyer. She looked nothing like the confident, well-dressed woman I had known all my life. Her face was pale, and she kept fidgeting with her hands. Lucas sat beside her, staring at the floor the entire time. After nearly 2 hours of arguments, the judge finally spoke. "Mrs. Thompson," the judge said, looking directly at my mother, "the evidence presented in this case is deeply troubling. Not only have you failed to prove any wrongdoing on Miss Thompson's part, but there is substantial evidence suggesting that you yourself engaged in questionable financial activities regarding your late husband's assets." My mother's lawyer tried to speak, but the judge raised his hand. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "your public statements and attempts to influence public opinion while this case was ongoing have been noted. I am dismissing your claim against Miss Thompson with prejudice. The will stands as written." He paused for a moment before delivering the final blow. "Additionally, I am referring this matter to the relevant authorities for further investigation into the financial transactions made prior to Mr. Thompson's death." My mother's face went completely white. The gavel came down. It was over. I walked out of the courtroom feeling strangely calm. Rebecca walked beside me. "You won," she said with a small smile. "Completely." I nodded, but I didn't feel the victory I thought I would. That same evening, my mother called me. It was the first time she had called since the hearing. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Ava," she said, her voice hoarse, "please, don't do this. They're saying I could face criminal charges. I'm your mother." I stayed silent for a few seconds before replying. "You should have thought about that before you tried to take everything from me," I said quietly. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice breaking, "but I'm still your mother. We can fix this. Just tell them to stop the investigation. Please." I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "I'm not going to protect you anymore. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." She started crying on the phone. "You're really going to destroy me?" she whispered. I thought about everything. The years of being treated like an outsider, the public humiliation, the lies she spread about me, and how she tried to steal what Richard had left me. "You already tried to destroy me first," I replied. "I'm just not letting you succeed." I ended the call. Over the next few months, my mother's life continued to fall apart. The investigation revealed several suspicious transactions, and she was eventually charged with financial misconduct. She lost most of her social standings, and many of her so-called friends disappeared. Lucas distanced himself from her completely and moved to another state. As for me, I finally had peace. I kept Richard's house and the money. More importantly, I no longer felt the need to seek validation from my mother. I had spent too many years trying to earn her love and approval. Now, I was finally free from that. One evening, almost a year after the will hating, I was sitting in Richard's old study, which was now mine, when I received a letter from my mother. It had been forwarded from my old address. I opened it. It was short. Ava, I know you probably won't reply, but I wanted to say that I'm sorry. Not because I lost, but because I finally understand how much I hurt you over the years. I was wrong. About everything. Mom. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it away. I didn't reply. Some wounds are too deep to heal with just an apology. If you've ever been betrayed by your own family over money or inheritance, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. After everything that happened, I realized one important truth. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who will hurt you the most when money is involved. And when that happens, you don't owe them your silence or your loyalty. You owe yourself the right to fight back. I fought back. And even though it cost me my relationship with my mother, I gained something far more valuable in return. My freedom, my peace, and the knowledge that I no longer have to shrink myself to make others comfortable. That, more than the house or the money, is what I'm most grateful for.